Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another series of the LinkedIn Live from MinSearch. I'm Michelle Stinson-Ross. I'm the president of MinSearch. And joining me today is one of our featured summit speakers, Dana DiTamaso. Hello and welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
You are joining us from your headquarters in Canada, are you not?
Yes. So I live on Vancouver Island, which is not where Vancouver is, just to make it extra confusing for tourists. It's an island off the coast. It's close to Vancouver, but not actually Vancouver.
So we are getting international today with our LinkedIn Live. Wink, wink. As much as North America.
Minnesota's basically Canada. Like, come on.
That's the reason why we love you so much.
Yeah.
So for folks that maybe don't know you as well, why don't you give everybody a little introduction to yourself?
Yeah. So this is my 24th year working in online marketing, which is like, this is gray hair is GA4 and this one is like Panda. Yeah. Anyway, so when I first started in the field, I was making websites. Turns out I'm way better at SEO than making websites. So I switched over to doing that. And then I did SEO for a really long time until I started getting more into analytics. And then slowly, starting in 2016, 2017, I moved into the analytics space. And now that takes up most of my time. So I'm president of Kickpoint, which is a digital marketing agency. There's 18 of us, and we're mostly in Edmonton, Alberta, a few people spread across different places in Canada. And then we also have Kickpoint Playbook, which is the learning platform that we've put together. And on there, that's where I've put together 2 courses so far, Analytics for Agencies and Practical GA4. And a lot of my time is spent beyond working with clients, teaching, training, helping people become better with analytics.
Excellent. So before we dive really deep into the topic that I know you're bringing to the MinSearch Summit, can you kind of give us an overview of the state of analytics and where it sits in marketing today? I know because this is something that continues to change. I have my good friend Alan Connect. I have learned a lot from him, and I am one of those marketers that I started in like content and social media, and I really appreciate the value and accountability that analytics provides for us. But I know that there are still a lot of businesses that are like, I know I need to measure it, but what do I measure? How do I measure it? I don't understand this analytics thing.
Yeah. And I think GA4 obviously didn't help. I think that GA4 is so much easier, I have to say, if you never learned universal analytics. I think where people really struggle is they're trying to take a universal analytics mindset and apply it to GA4, which just, you cannot do that. It does not work. And so I actually teach a course on analytics at the University of Alberta. And I find those students, they've rarely used universal analytics. Usually my course is their first exposure to any analytics at all. And they have a much easier time with GA4 because they weren't, ruined by all this universal analytics knowledge. They're like, why doesn't it work exactly the same way? Yeah. So they're coming at it blind. And I think that does really help. And I would say that, where we're at in terms of analytics, I think part of the transition to GA4 has also helped people realize their analytics isn't perfect. And they thought it was perfect. And so now there's a lot of, well, if I just fix this, or if I just do this, or if I completely ignore when someone says, don't track me, then my analytics will be perfect. And the answer is like, it's never going to be perfect, which the week before MinSearch, I'm actually speaking at MozCon, and that is my topic about how analytics is not perfect. So and I'm going to talk about it at MinSearch as well, with like a little bit more of a focus on GA4 explorations and whatnot. But the idea that the data you have isn't perfect. So you work with what you've got, you make, your judgments based on what you've got. But the reality is that if you're trying to slice numbers and saying, well, this number says 2.3 and this number says 2.4, they could both be 2.6. You don't know.
Yeah.
It's like it's not perfect enough for that level of scrutiny. And I think that's where, as marketers, especially marketers who haven't necessarily focused on analytics in the past, they're like, well, it must be me. I must be doing something wrong. Why is this broken? It's not you. And it's not broken. This is just the reality of analytics measurement in 2024, is that people don't want to be tracked all over the internet anymore. And consent banners, which Americans don't necessarily think about cookie consent quite as much as they should.
Mhm.
California is getting super into it. Illinois is going to have something about it. I think there may be a federal law coming down the pipe depending upon what happens next federal election in the States. In Canada, Quebec just passed Law 25. There's lots of stuff if you work with people in South Africa or Europe, you're used to cookie consent. And I don't think people realize how much less data you can get if you have a cookie consent banner and if people say no to it. Like you're just not going to get that kind of data. So if you're only getting, half or 25% of your data, what can you do with it? And then on top of that, there's ad blockers, which the most recent studies have shown that like only half of people actually are actually running without an ad blocker on a regular basis. So that means that you're working with maybe half of your data. And for Kickpoint Playbook, our learning site, based on our analytics, and I do this for a living. I set up really good analytics. When I see orders come in, you can't hide that you placed an order, but you can hide if you say no to consent or if you say
Mhm.
no to cookies or if you've got an ad blocker. Only half of orders actually show up at all in GA4. And of the half of orders that do show up in GA4, half of those are direct because people like you remove UTM codes before you click on a link. Because you're like, I don't want people to know where I actually came from. I'm going to remove this UTM. And so that just makes it like lots of direct traffic coming in. It's like, if
Mhm.
I can't do this, and literally like this is what I do. I am an expert in this field and I'm dealing with 25% of the attribution data. What hope does the rest of us have, right? So it's just like accept this reality.
Yeah.
And people talk about like server side tagging. Oh, server side will save it. You still can't track people if they say no with server side tracking.
Right.
And ad blockers are going to figure out server side tracking. They're getting there. So that's not really going to save you either. There's no like, it's not going back to the way it was. We just need to accept that and move on.
Right. I guess the marketing ops person in me goes, well, if I could only get maybe 20%, 20 to 25% of my data, kind of what's the point? And
Yep.
yet I still have to hold my marketing activities, my time, my dollars, all that stuff accountable to something. So what does that mean?
Yeah, and I think that this is where if you know that you're just accept that this is what you're tracking, then you can track the crap out of anyone who lets you track them. Like adding more on-site elements. This is actually what I talked about at MinSearch last year was the stuff that you could record on your website. And I don't know if those videos can you
Yes,
purchase the
we
videos
still
from
have
last
those
year's? Yeah.
videos.
So purchase the videos from last year because what I talked about was ways to measure how people engage with content on websites. And one of the things I talked about was using Google Tag Manager to record every image that's loaded, which is something that we do on the Playbook website because I'm real chatty and my blog posts are very long. And so the difference between, we can record scroll depths, right? 25, 50, 75, etc. But if the difference between 25 and 50% is an enormous number of pixels, I'm not actually going to know where you bailed. But if I'm recording every time an image enters your viewport, then I would know, where you go
Oh,
away. And people are
that's
like,
been brilliant.
thank you. So this is where it's like, yeah, I can't track everybody, but the people who say I can track them, boy, am I ever going to track you, right? It's like that's where you make your judgment calls from. And then in terms of like your tracking, just and getting rid of sort of sidestepping that emphasis on precision because it's not precise. And then I think too, like where this works into what I'm going to be talking about at MinSearch, which is about my talk is titled Content Analysis with GA4 Explorations in AI. And what I'm going to be talking about is like the idea, track everybody as much as you possibly can. You're not working with all the data, but you do have this subset. So if you include features where you're tracking the crap out of them, then what can you do in GA4 Explorations? And then what can you do using AI, ChatGPT specifically, in order to do more advanced analysis of the data that you can actually track, which is going to still help you make good decisions. You don't need 100% of the data to know certain trends. You just can't say with certainty that 1,000 people did this, but you can say that 10% of the people you were able to observe did this.
Gotcha. So can you explain really quickly what are the GA4 explorations? Can you kind of give us a primer, please?
Yeah, GA4 Explorations is a section of GA4. So when you go into GA4, you've got home, reports, explorations, and then advertising.
Mhm.
So reports is where people go most of the time. It's your standard GA4 report where you've got like a line chart or a bar chart and then a table. It's quite boring. I mean, you can customize those, and I do recommend customizing those,
Mhm.
but that part is kind of like the same old types of reports. Explorations are where you can get into more advanced features. And there's actually some dimensions and metrics in GA4. And if you're saying what's a dimension, what's a metric? A dimension is a grouping of data like a pages that were viewed or channels that brought people to the website. And a metric is how many times people came to your website or how many times that page was viewed. So there's dimensions and metrics in GA4 that are only available in explorations.
Mhm.
And if you've ever gone into the admin of GA4 and you click on data retention, you'll see this thing that says keep your data for, the default is 2 months, and you change it to 14 months, and you think, oh no, does that mean that Google's going to get rid of my data after 14 months? That only impacts explorations. It's kind of confusing in there. So definitely make sure that you've got your data in explorations, you've got that 14 months of data. Go into your right now, open up GA4, go into the admin, and then click on data retention settings. Make sure that's set to 14 months, hit save, start
Mhm.
collecting more data. Do that anyway. And then in explorations, you can do things like look for anomalies. So, for example, one of the things I'm going to include in my talk is an anomaly where we record a JavaScript error every time a JavaScript error is recorded on a site. And then we have a report that just shows the count of these errors. And then we can see, where the anomalies are, where were these
Mhm.
spikes. And then we can go back and compare that to like the commits in GitHub and say, when this particular functionality in the website is touched, we usually end up in JavaScript errors. Or Safari people are seeing errors, but Chrome people aren't, for example, which can help with your testing workflow.
Okay.
Because, a JavaScript error can negatively impact the way in which someone can engage with your website. It can also negatively impact your measurement. So you want to avoid those. Something else you can do are path explorations, which was an interesting feature that we did have in Universal Analytics.
Mhm.
But what I really like about it in GA4 is you can have path ending explorations. So instead of always having a starting point, you can say my ending point is this key page or
Mhm.
this key event, not conversion event anymore. We're all about key events now. This key event. And then you can go back and say, what are all the paths that led people to this specific key
Oh,
event?
that's nice.
And then you can add in segments as well. And there's a little trick I'm going to talk about in my talk on how you can actually put in a segment. You can segment by the channel, but
Mhm.
you can't do it with the default stuff. You have to do like a little workaround that I hope no one tells Google about. Google, if you're listening, I'm not telling what it is right now
Google's
because
all
I don't want you
worried
to fix it.
about
It's real good. But I'll talk about it at the admin
algo leak
search.
today, so
Yeah.
I think they're fine.
Yeah, they got other stuff going on this week. And then my other favorite exploration, because I'm a nerd and I have favorite explorations, is I really like the funnel exploration.
Okay.
And when people think about funnel, they think about an e-commerce funnel with like they added it to the cart, blah blah blah. But one of the cool things that you can do in GA4 is you can create segments, which are kind of like segments for in Universal Analytics,
Mhm.
where you can group people based on specific attributes. So I can say, I want a segment of people who do these things, and then you can create an audience based on that segment. And then you can trigger an event when someone becomes a member of that audience. Then you can use those triggered events as points in your funnel. So you can say, this person has watched, here, I have a learning website. This
Mhm.
person has finished the onboarding. This person has watched 3 videos. This person has watched 5 videos. They've watched 10 videos. You can see like as they go through the different processes. So you can have these kinds of funnels that really make a lot of sense for you. There's also time as well. You can see like how long it took people. So one funnel we have for one of our clients is they're filling out an appointment form. So I want to know, when they got to the website, and we filter this specifically by people in the geographic area they want to target. You got to the website, and then did you see the form, the page with the form? And then how long did it take you from seeing the page in the form to actually having the form submit event come up? And I don't want that to take a long time. People think, oh, I want people on my website for a long time. No, if I'm on the page with the form, I want you to move as quickly as possible through
Right.
that process.
Which is
And
why
what we're
we
seeing,
laughed
go
about
ahead.
bounce rates.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
we actually want you to bounce. We want you to fill out the form and move
I want
on.
you to fill the form and go away. That's it.
Yeah.
And then we can see that on mobile devices, actually, people have significantly faster times to complete the form than on desktop. So it's like, okay, well, what's going on with desktop then? And so then you get into like user intent and everything else. But this is the kind of stuff you can only find out in explorations. And one of the major themes in the talks I've given over my many, many years doing this is that, our job as marketers is not to provide data, it's to provide insights. The tools have the data in them.
Mhm.
You provide poor value to your customers, your clients, your boss, your coworkers when you just vomit out whatever GA4 is telling you. But by adding a funnel and setting it up based on specific key parts of that user's journey, and then turning on the elapsed time and then saying, here's something I'm noticing, that's an insight. And
Yeah.
that's the kind of thing that you get out of explorations.
Yeah.
And then
Oh,
finally, we're talking about like exploration data and then exporting that, putting it into ChatGPT, and then some questions you can ask, ChatGPT, for example. You could look at what people say in form fills, like just grab their descriptions of questions that they have and then compare that to the pages that are popular on the website. Like, does that match up, right? There's lots of things we're going to talk about in the ChatGPT part as well.
nice. Um, that last little bit about segmenting and whatever, I'm like, that funnel could actually be helpful data to validate like my lead scoring or to adjust my lead scoring based on what's actually going on in those funnels. I'm like, that lights my brain up in a hurry.
Oh yeah, because you can also, because segments and audiences can also be time-based, you could also say, this is outside of what I'm going to talk about, but I love audiences. One of the things you can do about them is you can say, here's an audience, people are entered in the audience when they do this, and then within 5 days, if they do this, for example. And that is something that we'd never had access to before. You can even use events generated by audience membership as a key event, which can then be imported into Google Ads as a conversion.
Okay.
So you could have an audience that's like people who've signed up more than once for my product or like, repeat customers. And if that's the case, like that's a different, remarketing audience. You say, put them in a remarketing audience with a delay. And then every 60 days start to like show them ads. For example, if you're like, do oil changes or you're a restaurant or, whatever it might be where you've got that kind of repeating business.
That's really cool. I know you mentioned just real briefly, like using AI to analyze like freeform text, right? What are some other cool things? And do you prefer ChatGPT or are there other AI options out there that might be worth exploring?
I personally only use ChatGPT, so that's where my experience is. I'm sure if there's other options, please tell me about them and tell me why you think they're great. It's just I've used ChatGPT and I'm like, this works, so I haven't really gone anywhere else,
Sure.
to be perfectly honest. But what I do really like about it is, and Andy Crestodina as well does some fantastic presentations on this. And what I'm talking to you about are things that I've learned from Andy. So one of the things that we are now doing, for example, is downloading a list of pages from GA4 along with some engagement data and some page view data, and like tell us based on this series of metrics that we're giving you which pages are most popular in search, which pages are most popular on social, and then based on that, here's a keyword list, what topics are we missing based on the information that I've given you, and out of this, what do you think is going to do well on search and what do you think is going to do well on social, because you obviously structure content differently if you're aiming for SEO versus social media. And that can also help us see, these ones are doing great on search. How can we change and repurpose this data to make it slightly different for a social media audience? What are the commonalities between the posts that do well on social? And what can we do to make sure that we're, applying that to other feature posts, for example?
Awesome. I love that so much. It's like, and anymore, social seems like it's a lot of work for very little value. So if AI is one of those places that we can do this better, more efficiently, maybe a little faster. Thank you. Yes, please sign me up for that.
Yeah, and I think too, it's definitely getting away from that idea of like I'm just gonna tweet a lot or I don't know, post a lot. We're not calling them tweets anymore. I'm gonna call them tweets until I die. Post a lot or tweet a lot or and most of my time actually is spent on LinkedIn now because I find it's a much more effective social network, especially in the B2B space. And certainly, LinkedIn is so much slower than other networks. I have people who will like posts that I posted 2-3 weeks ago. Obviously, they must have seen it now. So posts circulate for a really long time. And there's obviously some, little quirks posting on LinkedIn, and I'm sure other speakers who are far more
Sure.
experienced with social media, other than I use it, can speak to that. But one of the things that I do like about LinkedIn is that you can see if there are patterns. And sometimes what we find too are like the posts on LinkedIn that don't necessarily drive a lot of clicks or comments are the posts that drive people. And by clicks, I mean like liking it or whatever, but they click on the links in those posts, go to the website, and then do the thing that we want them to do. And so that's where tying together, here's the post I had on LinkedIn. I made sure to UTM it so I know exactly where they ended up. Now I have this data from LinkedIn and I have this data from GA4. Tell me how well these posted. And then you're getting more of a end-to-end view of your social media. LinkedIn doesn't have great exporting tools. That's one thing that's frustrating about it. But you can use third-party tools like Supermetrics to get some of the data out of there a little bit more easily than what LinkedIn provides you.
Sure. Well, and you mentioned ChatGPT. So for those of you that may not quite be aware, LinkedIn and ChatGPT all fall under the Microsoft umbrella. So the integration between those two is probably better than other things.
Well, and I wonder too, it's funny because as a LinkedIn learning instructor, when these ChatGPT tools first came out, they emailed all the instructors and said, hey, don't use these to write your scripts. Like, okay, then we are getting some guidance together. Don't do anything about it yet.
Right.
And so since then, it's been more like, I don't really put out official guidance. I know one of the things, for example, that I do just from a writing perspective is like run what you've written through ChatGPT and like tell me areas that you think people might get hung up or like where my language isn't totally clear, right? That's a fantastic use of that product. But beyond that, looking at the analysis and saying like, where are people dropping off? How are people engaging with this? Because ChatGPT can look at data so much more easily than we can with our sad human brains.
Yes.
And I mean, I know it's called AI. It is still just a machine learning tool, and machine learning is what we need in order to do this stuff. So it's that's where it does really shine for sure.
Cool. I want to take a pause because we do have a handful of people watching live. And if you guys have any questions for Dana as we continue to talk for a few minutes longer, please make use of the live chat and drop us a line or at least say hello. And if you have any questions for Dana that you'd like answered right now, by all means, put those in the chat. We will try to get to them. But while we're giving you guys a chance to do that, Dana was telling me a little bit about the mad crazy schedule that she has now in the summit. And I wanted to kind of shift gears and talk a little bit about like the fun side of going to Moz, going to do LinkedIn Learning. As much you're really going to rack up the airline miles here for a little bit. Talk to me a little bit about what drives you to continue to do these live events.
Yeah, let me tell you, COVID sucked because recording into your computer, no one, I had cats. I don't have cats anymore, unfortunately. The cats don't laugh at your jokes, right?
No.
Like my wife has heard my jokes 1,000 times. They are no longer funny to her, And there's an energy that you get when you're speaking to people, and that helps you change how you're speaking or be like, that seemed interesting to people. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. And that's just completely gone from remote information. And so that is one of the things that I like, even when I'm doing a live, for example, is like, give us some feedback, talk to us about what's going on. And the other thing too, I mean, I just recorded a talk that's going to be published for a conference. It's like pre-recorded in a couple of weeks. And it's like knowing that that's the format of the conference, that it's always pre-recorded, that's fine because that's the expectation going in. But taking a conference like Moz or MinSearch, which is live, and then having it move to that online experience is less fun because you are used to having that audience. And one of the great things about conferences, and the reason why I love going so much, is the conversations that you have with people. You find out about weird stuff that people have tried. You get to hear all sorts of interesting stories. And I love it when people come up to you and they're like, I have a really weird specific situation and I would like your feedback on it. And I hear about the wildest stuff from people, and people will come up to you and they're like, this is the problem I'm having in analytics. Like it's a problem you're never going to encounter again in your life. But knowing that this is how it happened, in case you ever encounter it again, like this is a great way to have that. And also have conversations about like, what are people doing? What tools are they using? What's some fun stuff that they've been working on, and also right now, like, how's everybody doing? Like, economically, it's not
Yeah.
necessarily the best time to be working in marketing. And as someone who's been doing this for a while, like 2008 is what jumps to mind in terms of, I don't know if you were working in this field in 2008, but that was rough. But it was different than it is now. 2008 was like an immediate drop, and then a fairly quick recovery. This feels like
We are
dropping and then like maybe, oh, maybe
slowly
not,
sliding in.
maybe, right? Like, it's just, yeah.
Are we going to come up out of this? We don't know.
No, we're not. No, no.
We don't know.
So it's very different. And I think too, like, everybody's just like tired. COVID was a
Mhm.
lot. Let's talk about, like, COVID was a lot. And I don't
Yeah.
think we've had like this global reckoning yet of everyone's exhaustion from everything we've been doing over the past 4 years. And so I think having these in-person conversations and also being like saying to people like, yeah, we had a really rough time at our agency and these people got laid off and it was hard. And I think that these are the kinds of conversations that are really important to have in an open way with other marketers. And that's one of the things I like about MinSearch is that everyone there is super friendly. I think that it's Minnesota generally, but there's also a feeling that like there's enough to go around and it isn't necessarily as cutthroat as you would find, in other markets.
Right.
And so there is more of that friendliness and sharing and an openness vibe of what comes at a MinSearch event. Plus you guys always have good swag. So there's that. I
We
was
do
saying
our
before we hopped on live that my wife still uses a water bottle that she got years ago.
cheers to
Yeah.
swag.
The one that she has is clear and it has like Minnesota sayings all over it. Yeah, she loves it.
Very nice.
Mhm.
So I opened the door to talk a little bit about fun. So you said that
Mhm.
you're actually staying a little longer than just the day of the conference, and I wanted
Mhm.
to. I posted on some of my personal socials, not the MinSearch branded social, but my own personal social. Um, Come to the summit, stay for the Pride. So the summit event is actually within the city limits of St. Paul at the River Center, and St. Paul Pride is going on the weekend. As soon as we're done with summit, there is Pride going on all over the place. There's going to be a huge Pride event in Rice Park. So for those of you that are familiar with the River Center, the square block park that is immediately adjacent to the River Center is Rice Park. So our venue is right in the red hot center of what's going to be going on for St. Paul Pride on the weekend. So any of you that are able to come for the summit, stay for the Pride, there's going to be a lot of really good stuff going on. There's a festival going on in Rice Park. There's going to be a Pride parade in St. Paul on Saturday. So I have to give props to my local community and make sure that people know that there's more to offer than just the summits.
Mhm. Yeah, and unfortunately, I have to fly out Saturday morning, so I'm not gonna be able to stay too long, but hopefully there's something on Friday that I can check out for sure.
There
And
should
it's
be some stuff going on Friday as well. So
yeah.
definitely excited to talk about that, think about that, and thank you, Dana, so
Yeah.
much for letting me mention St. Paul
Oh,
Pride.
yeah, and actually, while we're talking about Pride-related stuff, I'm gonna talk about my favorite charity in case people are thinking about, what should we do with corporate donations? We're looking for a new charitable partner. There's an organization called Rainbow Railroad, which is in Canada and the US, and they were in Canada only for a long time, but now they've expanded into the US, and they're a charity in the US now as well. And Rainbow Railroad helps refugees from countries where it is illegal or, you're going to basically be killed if you're queer, and help them move to countries like Canada where it is safer to be so. And so your donation goes directly to helping people move. So a lot of their donations are like, we're going to get you a plane ticket. That's what they pay for. We're going to set you up with refugee services in Canada and a little bit in the States as well. They're slowly starting to do a little bit of that in the States. So if you are thinking about a charity to support, when I spoke at Local SEO for Good with Bright Local, that was my charity. And it's something that I do talk about quite a bit, is supporting an organization like Rainbow Railroad, because I think it's where we can celebrate Pride because we live in the countries that we do, but not everyone, and even with the things that are going on right now, which are not so great in terms of like laws and everything else, it's like, yeah, I don't really like going to the southern states. But I would say, like, obviously Minneapolis is fine. You know, it's a liberal, safe sort of place for a queer person, relatively speaking.
Mhm.
But, you know, again, like, I'm also a person of color, so this is part of it too, is like making sure that not only are we making safe spaces here, but let's not be complacent. All this can be taken away from us. I came out in the 90s and I remember what that was like, and that was
Mhm.
nothing compared to coming out in the 60s, you know? So
True.
definitely supporting organizations like Rainbow Railroad, and also making sure that in your communities you're making it safe for everybody, because we're not all free. We're not free until all of us can be free.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And I'm
Yeah.
glad I could type fast enough to get that link because I that was thank you for giving me the opportunity to share that as well.
Mhm.
We're coming up on the end of our conversation, guys. If you got any questions for Data, you better get them in quick because we're going to wrap this up in just a moment. Um, I've got your link tree that I
Mhm.
now have on the screen. Um, Tell us a little bit about how people can connect with you and how they can obviously learn from you
Mhm.
outside of the summit, and just like share a little bit about how approachable you are and how you like to engage with the community.
Yes, please come say hi, even if it looks like I'm on my phone and very busy. I'm probably not. I'm probably just taking like a moment to look at my phone. So just please come say hi to me.
Mhm.
I love speaking to people at conferences. It's my one extrovert time. I live like on a mountain in the middle of nowhere. That's my introvert time. And then when I leave, I get to be an extrovert at conferences. So please come say hi if you see me in person. Linktree is the best place right now because it has links to everything that I do. I'm mostly active on LinkedIn, but we do post videos on YouTube. You can also get access to the courses. So I have two courses right now. One of them is Practical GA4, which is $279, and that is GA4 from start to finish with lots of focus on use cases. It's practical, hence the name, you
Mhm.
know, how you can use GA4 on a daily basis. Then if you need something a little bit beyond just GA4, we have Analytics for Agencies, which is GA4 and Tag Manager and Looker Studio, and all of our processes and tools and default templates in terms of our default Looker Studio report, our default Google Tag Manager container, and it's everything we do at Kickpoint, my agency, when we deliver and sell analytics projects to clients
Okay.
for you. So for any of those courses as well, if you are listening right now and you live outside of the US, we offer parity pricing to 142 countries around the world. So if you say live in India, the Indian rupee does not have great purchasing power when compared to the US dollar. So you fill out the form, we send you a coupon for 75% off, and that is essentially what it would be if we change the purchasing power of 279 down to what it's going to be for the Indian rupee, because we want to make sure that these courses are affordable, not just for people in North America or Europe, but around the world. So if you know people outside the US who are like, oh, I can't afford any education, send them the parity pricing link, which is the very first link on the link tree that you see on the screen right now.
Very cool. Dana, I I wish you all the best with how many times you're going to be getting on and off airplanes fairly
I'm
soon.
going to get so many points. I'm so excited. Because Air Canada, who's my primary airline, measures based in segments. So you can get to status if you fly a certain number of segments or if you fly a certain number of miles. And
Oh,
because I
nice.
live in an island, I always have like literally an 11-minute flight to get to Vancouver. But that's two
That's a
segments,
segment.
and so you can get platinum just through segments. So that's my goal, is like
That is
fly a
very
lot.
cool. That is very cool. Well, for any of you that are going to be attending both Moz and MinSearch, because I know you're out there, I've talked to you.
Hmm.
You guys get to see Data twice, and we are looking forward to having you. Obviously, um, we at MinSearch are open to any questions that you guys have about Summit. I'm sure Dana would say the same. If Dana doesn't know the answer, she will always direct you back to us so that we can make sure that you get all the answers as
Absolutely.
far as the event itself goes. But I can't wait for you to get here. And I
Yeah.
hope to goodness that the hotel room you booked has a super comfy bed because I think you're going to need it.
It'll be good. It's one of the hotels I usually stay at. So like in terms of like the brand, so I know what it's going to be like. It's good.
Cool, cool. We look forward to seeing you soon.
You bet. Thanks again for having me.